I've said it before. You can't make a perfect translation. You can't do it. And the more different the cultures, the harder it is to make a good translation. Picture going down into the Amazon and finding an unknown tribe, and then trying to translate a book about ice and snow. You can't use pictures, and you can only use one word for ice and one word for snow. You can't do it. Just because you can't make a perfect translation doesn't mean you can't make a good translation. If you look at all the different translations of a verse, most of the time they say the same thing. Most verses can be translated pretty darn well. But if you go through verse by verse and look at the way they're translated in all the different versions, every once in a while you'll find a verse that, oh, wait a minute, all these different versions don't say the same thing. That's clue number one, that there's something in that verse that is hard to translate. Now, for me, sometimes I will read a verse, and if I really think about it, it doesn't make sense. That triggers to me that there's a problem with translating this verse. In today's lesson, we're going to find two verses that I don't think were translated very well. Yeah, no, that's kind of an ego thing. Oh, what do you know? So what I'm going to do is when I hit those two verses, I'm going to show you why I don't think they're translated well, so you can see where I'm coming from on this. Romans 5:2. Through whom we have also obtained access into this grace in which we stand, and we rejoice in the hope of God's glory. I focused on the word rejoice to start with. The problem is, in the Greek, there's only two possible meanings for the Greek word behind that. One is take pride in, and the other is boast. Now, if you look at different versions, you'll see that most of them say boast. What we're looking at here is the Net Bible, and this Greek word is used over 30 times in the New Testament. Only in this chapter does the Net Bible translate it as rejoice. In all the other cases, they translate it as boast. I think that gives you a pretty good clue. So really, this word should be translated as we take pride in the hope of God's glory, or we boast in the hope of God's glory. Personally, I prefer take pride in. The difference between the two is they both are take pride in, but the one is verbalized. So you go around saying, hey, where the other one is, you just feel it internally. Okay, the second word I have a problem with here is the word translated glory. The resource that all the translators use give four possible translations for the Greek word translated glory here. Number one, physically bright or shining, like the sun. Well, that doesn't really fit. State of being magnificent. So we rejoice in the hope of God's being magnificent. Hope? We don't need hope. He's magnificent. Doesn't really make sense. Let's skip to number 4. We rejoice in the hope of God being deserving of honor. Again, hope. He deserves honor. There's no hope involved. That leaves us with number 3. Recognition of status or performance. Oh, this makes sense. Praise coming from God. We rejoice in the hope of God recognizing our performance, giving us praise. That's pretty powerful. changing the word rejoice to take pride in, it becomes we take pride in the hope of God giving us praise. This kind of summarizes it. We take pride in the hope of God's praise. I'll give you just a second here to look at this before we go on. Romans 5:3-4. Not only this, but we also rejoice in sufferings, knowing that the suffering produces endurance, and endurance, character, and character, hope. Okay, with Begdad, the two possible meanings, I think they're really going with the second, the active state of being patient, waiting for something or something, whatever. I don't think that's what's going on here. Of course, when you're suffering, you're going to endure. Except in the first century, a lot of people quit the church and renounced Jesus and whatever. They didn't really endure. I think it's more one, the capacity to hold out or to bear up in the face of difficulty, patience and endurance and fortitude. The capacity to hold out. Toughness. You become tough. You're able to endure. So, not only this, but we rejoice and actually take pride in sufferings, knowing that suffering produces toughness. Romans 5:3-4. Not only this, but we also rejoice in sufferings. That's take pride in, knowing that suffering produces endurance, and endurance character, and character hope. How does endurance produce character? It really doesn't. And how does character have anything to do with hope? It really doesn't. Okay, so here are the two possible meanings. One, a testing process, a test or an ordeal. Two, the experience of going through a test with a special reference to the result, standing a test, character. Well, they're clearly going with two, but you're missing the whole point. You know, the whole point is that you took a test and proved something. And since he's been talking about faith, I think the point is it's proving your faith. A testing of your faith. What is being tested? Paul has been talking about, like in 5:1, therefore, since we have been justified through faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ. Your faith is being tested. What does proving your faith have to do with hope? Does it produce hope? Well, it seems like you start out with hope. That's part of what is being a Christian is all about. So if you start out having hope, then how does surviving the test produce hope? It doesn't. Well, let's take a look at that word produces. It has three possible meanings. To bring about a result by doing something. Okay, that's kind of what they're choosing, produces. To cause a state or condition, to bring about it. Yeah, produce, create. That's what they're doing. 3 is interesting. It's not as common. To cause, to be well prepared. To prepare someone. I think this one actually makes the most sense. If we translate it this way, then if I'm going to paraphrase it, not translation, but just kind of give the idea of what the passage is saying, it would be this. Not only this, but we take pride in sufferings, knowing that suffering prepares us by making us tougher, so that we can prove our faith and prepare us for our hope. Let's summarize. I'm going to read our paraphrases now. We take pride in the hope of God's praise. Not only this, but we take pride in sufferings, knowing that suffering prepares us by making us tougher, so that we can prove our faith and prepare us for our hope. Yeah, first thought you think, oh, our hope is salvation. No, that's not what he's talking about. He's referring back to the previous verse. We take pride in the hope of God's praise. So, how do we get that hope? How do we get God's praise? He says, through suffering. Suffering gives us the opportunity to prove our faith and prepares us for the hope of God's praise.